What's up, ARC Junkies? Welcome back to the show. Joining me today is Jim Belosic, CEO and founder of SendCutSend. Jim has an incredible story of how he built a unique company to perform a very necessary service for home hobbyists, makers, custom fabricators, and small to large business owners. During the day, Jim would work designing various types of websites and software programs and would work on building crazy custom cars in his off hours. He built many of the custom fabricated parts himself, and one day he incorporated a CNC plasma cutter to increase speed and accuracy of the parts that he needed. Jim realized he couldn't be the only one in his area that needed custom parts made, so he started to fill machine downtime with custom orders, and thus SendCutSend was born. We'll get right into Jim's story after a quick word from our supporters. Today's episode of the ARC Junkies Podcast is brought to you by CK Worldwide, the seasoned veterans in TIG welding since 1967. CK Worldwide has been honing their craft and delivering top-notch torches, parts, and accessories for decades, longer than most of us have been alive. If you haven't experienced the CK Flex Lock torch yet, you're in for a treat. Imagine a torch with a head that can rotate a full 360 degrees. Talk about versatility. Whether you prefer gas or water-cooled models, CK's got you covered. And let's not forget about their SuperFlex cables, offering unparalleled flexibility and durability, ensuring you can tackle any project with ease. But that's not all. CK Worldwide continues to innovate with products like their Gas Saver kits featuring glass nozzles for improved gas flow coverage, and visibility while saving on gas consumption. Plus, their latest MT375 AC/DC welding machine comes complete with a water cooler and cart for ultimate convenience. When it comes to TIG welding, CK Worldwide sets the standard. We're also brought to you by Outlaw Leather. Are you in search of premium leather welding gear and accessories? Look no further than Outlaw Leather. Outlaw specializes in crafting custom leather welding hoods, arm pads, bolt bags, sleever bar holders, tool belts, and a wide range of custom welding accessories. Each piece is handcrafted with precision and designed to withstand the toughest conditions. But that's not all. Outlaw Leather also stocks essential PPE for welding, ensuring you stay safe on the job. Plus, they offer a selection of quality hand tools you can trust. Visit outlawleather.com today to explore their extensive range of products. Whether you're a professional welder or a DIY enthusiast, Outlaw has you covered. And the best part is, as a listener to the ARC Junkies podcast, you can save 15% off on all in-stock leather goods when you use code word ARCJunkies in the discount box at checkout. Outlaw Leather is your trusted source for custom leather welding gear, PPE, and quality hand tools. Elevate your welding game today with Outlaw Leather. All right, you know what time it is. Fire up your machine, drop your hood, and turn me up 5.
Thank you for downloading show number 329 of the ARC Junkies Podcast.
You're listening to the ARC Junkies Podcast, helping you make every weld better than your last with each episode. And now your host, Jason Becker.
Jim, welcome to the ARC Junkies Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, sure thing, man. So you're out there in Nevada, right?
Yeah, Reno, Nevada.
Okay, and that's like nowhere near Vegas.
Not even close. A lot of people will call me and they're like, "Hey, man, I'm in Vegas for a couple days. Let's have lunch." I'm like, "Okay, get in your car and drive about 8 hours." Reno is totally in the opposite end of the state. We're about 30 minutes away from Lake Tahoe, actually.
Okay. Now, being up that way, like it's because I believe that Reno area is like heavy into manufacturing, right? Because I know there's like a lot of equipment manufacturers and stuff up there in that area.
Yeah, it's kind of new for the region. Really, Nevada as a whole has been really focused on gaming and tourism. But ever since, maybe 2008 or so with that recession, we kind of reformed ourselves to be more focused on manufacturing and logistics. So when Tesla moved into the area, that was kind of a boom for manufacturing, because not only did they show up and start making batteries and stuff at the Gigafactory, but then all of the little businesses that sprung up around it really created this culture of manufacturing and industry.
I didn't realize Tesla went up there. I thought they were. I knew they were in California for a while, and then they kind of dipped out and went to Texas during like 2020. But I didn't realize they had a spot up in Reno also.
Yeah. Actually, the original Gigafactory is just outside of Reno, about 30 minutes to the east. massive facility, and created a ton of jobs, and as well as like manufacturers that just support them. There's a bunch of guys in town that do manufacturing work almost exclusively for Tesla, which can be also, a good and bad thing.
Okay. Yeah, I would imagine so.
Yeah, I think especially at the beginning, they were so busy, trying to get everything running, and money was no object. And so, I know a couple of guys that were building just like tooling carts for them. They're like, hey, I need 120 tooling carts, and I need them in 2 weeks. I don't care what it costs, just make it happen. So a lot of people created these little businesses around it. But now fast forward, 5 years later, and they're not ordering at the same amount, or they're more sensitive to price now because they don't need all the speed. And, they just recently did a round of layoffs. So it is starting to hurt some of the local economy as well.
Okay. Are there other businesses moving in there? Because usually when a company like of that stature kind of moves in, other people start to flock to those territories. I know they're doing the same thing in Tennessee.
Yeah, for sure. Once Tesla was over here, we also got Apple built a really big data center. So did Google. There's a huge data center by a company called Switch. And then, just the logistics has gone crazy. We're located right along I-80. So there's been, massive warehouses. Walmart has this huge, distribution center. I think they have 1 million square foot of just freezer space. So just really huge logistics places, popping up all over the place out here. So yes, we're in the middle of the desert. It's a really small city, but there's a lot going on out here.
I can't imagine 1 million square foot freezer. Like one of the largest buildings that I ever got to work on and erect was 1 million square feet, for a single project. I couldn't imagine that. Oh, that's the cold storage area. Holy crap.
Yeah. Well, and we've had some employees, come to us from that facility, and, imagine working 12 hours in there too. So in the middle of summer, they're suiting up in parkas, and going to go do a 12-hour stint in, 10 degree below. So they're pretty happy when they come to us.
Damn, yeah, I'd imagine so. At least, it's consistent somewhat. You probably got AC in your facility. You walk outside. It's a little warm. You get back in the car. But
yeah,
going
totally.
from sub-zero temperatures to, plus 100s, it's a different story. It's
wild for those
It's like
guys.
cold plunging and then kind of getting out and walking into the sauna.
Yeah, exactly.
Pass out in the parking lot. Damn. So tell me a little bit about your fabrication and background in the metalworking industry.
Yeah, it's actually limited in the industry, I would say. We've only been doing this for almost 6 years, and a lot of my crew has been doing it since they could walk. We have guys with 20, 30, 40 years of experience. So I still feel like a newbie in industry. But I've been building stuff since I was little, go-karts and et cetera. I don't know if Legos count as fabrication, but I can say
that's how I learned how to read blueprints.
yeah, that's
like
true.
5-6 years old. That's how I learned how to that and the erector sets.
I may need to go change my LinkedIn, and I'll add some fabrication history to my to my profile if I'm doing Legos from 5 years old.
There you go.
But no, really, it started more in my early 20s. So 20 years ago, my career at the time was in software, and I kind of stumbled into that. I'm a graphic artist by trade, I guess. I started when I was 15 years old working at a sign company doing hand painting. So we'd hand paint letters and stuff on the side of guys' trucks or on their windows or whatever. And then I kind of turned that into a career in graphic arts. So designing brochures and business cards and silly stuff. This was back in the 90s. The internet wasn't really a thing. But as my career kind of progressed, people started coming to me and they're like, hey, I heard about this thing called the internet. There's websites. Can you build me a website? And I was always struggling for cash. So the answer was always, yes, I'll figure it out. So I actually used to go to Barnes and Noble and read books on how to build websites and just read them right there and take notes and then leave them because I couldn't afford to buy the book. but then that's how I taught myself to build websites. So the websites turned into software, because then I started making more and more complex websites. People would want a reservation system, or they'd want some sort of accounting system built into their website. I was like, yeah, hell yeah, I'll do it. I probably oversold myself a few times because I had no idea how to do it, but give me a couple weeks and I can figure it out. So anyway, in the early 2000s, I kind of looked around and I was like, oh, okay, I have a software company, and things were going well. I had a little more free time, and I started working on, more interesting fabrication projects. I'd been into cars forever. My dad was a car guy. My grandpa was a car guy. So I was always into it. So, I'd do an engine swap or do a paint job or do an interior, something like that. But what really made me happy was doing something that no one had ever seen before, so, turning something into like a gasser style car, or, using a powertrain that no one would ever consider, putting rotaries into stuff that doesn't deserve a rotary. And then just kind of building upon that, kind of honed some of my backyard fabrication skills. And then, fast forward to 2018, and I kind of got bored with doing like the resto mod stuff. I got bored with just doing a paint job or just doing an LS swap or whatever. So I was like, well, what can I do that's really interesting? It's going to push, some of my engineering skills. It's going to push my fabrication skills. And that was right at the time when, Tesla was becoming popular, and there was a few wrecked ones that were starting to show up. So I found a wrecked Tesla Model S, stole the rear end out of it with the powertrain. And then I had a project car laying around, and it was a 1981 Honda Accord 4-door sedan. And I was like, how are we going to stuff this Tesla drive unit into this chassis, and so that it's ultra lightweight, and let's just see how fast it'll go. So we ended up calling it Teslonda, and there's a couple videos of it on YouTube. It's a silly looking car because I had some packaging constraints. But that was really like my first foray into doing something, ultra weird that just kind of pushed my capabilities. And once I did that, I was like, oh my God, there's no going back. There's no way I'm ever going to do like an LS swap again. That's way too mild.
Was like a Teslonda was a fully functioning like roadworthy car, or just something you want to take out on the track? Or, I mean, you could actually daily drive it.
Well, yeah, that's going back to Nevada. That's the beauty of Nevada, is everything's legal here. So yeah, it's fully street legal. And yeah, it doesn't have much of a range. So I used the battery pack out of a Chevy Volt. So not many kilowatts to play with there. It's got about a 60-mile range if you're lucky. But it's super fun to commute in. It's super fun just to win every stoplight race. It'll pick the front wheels up off the ground. Yeah, it doesn't weigh much. It's
kind of like a sleeper there at the stop sign. You got an old beat up Honda. And
well, so that was the idea, is I wanted it to be a sleeper, but because of packaging, it ended up looking like a 1950s or 1960s gasser style car. So it ended up being on like 32-inch Mickey Thompson slicks that were sticking out of each side about 9 inches. And because of where the battery pack went in the transmission tunnel, and then where the engine used to be, I had to completely redo the suspension. And the easiest way to do it was to use a straight axle on leaf springs. So the car, sits up, it's got this like stink bug stance to it, or reverse stink bug stance to it. And it, it's on weld, skinny drag wheels up front too. So the thing looks goofy as hell, and everyone thinks it's kind of a clown car until they see it just disappear.
How fast does it go?
I've only had it up to like 150, I think it trapped once, but that was absolutely terrifying. I'm using a lot of components from Speedway or wherever I could find them the cheapest. And
To make it work, not necessarily function correctly.
yeah. And so once you get up into triple digits, you're like, oh man, I should have spent more on that steering box.
But what was the 0 to 60?
I think the record was like 2.3, something like that. I was really trying to get it down to 1.9, but I just couldn't get enough tire under it.
So you weren't able to put all the battery packs from the actual Tesla unit. You had to step down to something smaller. I would imagine that would kind of drop some weight too.
Yeah, and that's actually really common in like EV conversions where people are like, "Oh, just take the guts out of the Tesla and put it into anything." What they don't realize is the entire bottom of the Tesla is batteries, and shoving that into a car that wasn't designed for it is a huge challenge. So, if I was going to do it again, I would probably use a pickup truck and just put all the batteries in the bed. It's a much quicker way to fabricate or do an EV conversion if you can use a pickup truck or a van or something like that. I actually think that at some point in the future, one of our delivery vans will be, Tesla powered, and talk about a sleeper. I think that'll be pretty fun at the stoplights.
I'll just get one of them old Astro minivans, or like a Volkswagen bus would be kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Actually, there's been a lot of guys who have done some really nice Tesla swapped or any EV swapped Volkswagen buses, and those are really really cool. I'd love to do one, but man, the cost of buses is like through the roof now,
Yeah.
even for like an old junky one.
Well, everybody's getting in on restoring them. I've had a couple people that take my class. That's kind of what they do on the side. That's one of their hobbies is resto for Volkswagen buses. And one of my former students, her and her husband, they do that on the weekends too. Now it's like a cult following. I mean, they've got meetups and all kinds of stuff throughout, I guess, all across the United States.
Yeah, and then for the people who either can't fabricate or don't want to, but they do have a big checkbook, they'll cut a check for six figures for those things if they're done right. So yeah, the demand for them is very very high right now.
Damn, you can make a full-time business just restoring old VW buses and turning around and selling to people that can't fabricate.
I think that's the dream. Are you familiar with Ring Brothers?
And is that the company that takes like the Teslas and kind of jacks them up and does all kind of crazy custom work to them?
Maybe they have. They're kind of known in more like the pro touring side, or more like the resto mod side. They'll take an old Chevelle or something and just put an incredible amount of man hours into it and a lot of custom fabricated parts. They'll redo the door handles and the hood hinges, and they'll redo every nut and bolt. And it takes them a year, but then they'll take it to somewhere like Barrett Jackson and sell it for $500,000 or who knows what, and then they start the next one the next year. So that's honestly a dream, is to be able to build what you want, take your time on it, sell it to someone with a big checkbook, and then start again. I love to build. Once it's done, I'm definitely not interested in it. I've sold way too many unfinished projects because I get excited about a new one. So if I could just do that forever, that's ideal. And I guess that's kind of what I do today.
That'd be your dream job.
Yeah, for sure.
So what else have you built besides the Teslanda?
After Teslanda, I've always loved steam powered things. We have a town here called Carson City, and they have a really cool railroad museum. And my dad would take me there on Sundays, and they'd pull out these huge steam trains from the V&T Railway, which was the railway that served the Comstock lode, like the huge silver discovery that we had here in the 1800s. So these big, massive, scary steam-powered engines would come out, and I was just they seem like a living, breathing thing. So being able to do something with steam was really interesting to me. So I started looking for like an old steam powered car that I could purchase, like a white or a Doble or like a Stanley steamer or something like that. But dude, those things are so crazy expensive. you got to be Jay Leno or something to have one. And I was like, well, why can't I build one myself? I'm sure, steam is like kind of like a compressor. I can probably figure it out. You know, w-
How
actually,
hard could it be?
yeah, how hard could it be? So, my being a novice, being ignorant actually helped me, because if I knew how complex it was, I probably wouldn't have done it. Um, so I was able to locate a really small twin cylinder steam engine that was manufactured around the turn of the century. It's about the size of like a Yeti cooler, or a small Yeti cooler. They used them for like these, what they called a steam launch, which was like a little tiny boat that people would use to go putt around in a river or whatever. So I found one of these, relatively reasonable because they made thousands of them. And I was like, all right, here's my base. How am I going to make a car out of this thing? Uh, the next step was I wanted to make sure that it was street legal. And even though Nevada is very, very lenient, they do like you to have a VIN. So I was like, okay, what's the cheapest VIN that I can find? And I found I think it was like a 31 Ford Model A, just frame rails, but it had a title and it had a VIN. I was like, all right, here we go. So it's going to be, kind of vintage, kind of steampunkish, feel. So I just built the car around the requirements. I didn't really think much about styling or whatever. I just started solving problems as I went. I was like, all right, I got the steam engine. Now I need to build a boiler. So I built the boiler out of a couple old nitrogen tanks, and brazed some copper tube to it to convert the energy from a couple like turkey fryer burners under it. So propane fuel to run turkey deep fryer burners, which then were heating up used nitrogen tanks, feeding 150 psi steam into this turn of the century steam engine, along with a lot of valves and gauges and all kinds of weird stuff. If you've ever seen the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, like the car that they drive, that was kind of this thing. Made a lot of noise, a lot of smoke, a lot of steam. Did not go very fast. It took a half hour to warm up. It would run for about a mile, and then it took about a half hour to cool down. But that's probably my favorite project that I've ever done, because it was just weird, and I learned so much from it. And it was really like a never-ending project, because you could always improve it.
It sounds like a pretty complex build.
Yeah, exceedingly complex, and it was something that I had never done before. And what I found out is not a lot of people had done it before.
I was going to say, that's not something you just hop on YouTube and be like, how do you build a steam engine, or how do you make a steam engine function?
Yeah, it was funny. I actually, to get some information, I had to join a newsletter, and the newsletter would publish, the names and addresses of these guys in this club, in these steam engine clubs, and you'd have to physically write to these guys who are 80, 85 years old and ask them questions. So it was like having a pen pal, but it was really cool. You just got to be very patient.
Damn, that's pretty slick. My grandfather was big into steam engines, and he had one. It was a Bessemer. So I don't know.
Okay.
So I guess it's like a multifunctional. I mean, it's just the engine, and you could apply it to a bunch of different things. But he kind of had to, you get it going by spinning this massive, like 8-foot diameter flywheel. And so he's part of this thing. It's the Ashtabula County Antique Engine Club, and it's up in northeastern Ohio. And every year at this, the fair, they would, they just had their big convention out there. And I mean, you could walk for. I think they opened it up on Monday. You could walk all week and not make it through everything. And it was kind of like hopping in the Wayback Machine and just seeing some of this really cool old-timey stuff, things that would like fit on your desk to things that, you need a semi-trailer to haul. It was just insane. But I mean, it's the same thing, it's a bunch of 70, 80-year-old dudes in overalls, talking about, this engine, that engine, and, and they do most of the work on it.
Yeah, what I found is those guys are not on the internet.
No, you're not going to find them on your forums.
Oh, no. So I kind of actually liked the challenge of that. Sometimes if you go into the forums, or the internet or YouTube to try and find an answer, you can get swayed one way or the other, and you could go down a rabbit hole where you kind of lose some of the originality, or you lose some of the challenge of the project because some guy will say like, oh, that'll never work, or oh, you have to use this brand, that's the only brand that'll work. And I don't know, it's almost fun to just figure it out yourself.
That sounds like the internet. Just give up
Yeah.
now. It's a lot easier
Yeah,
just to
totally.
hang out and tell people to give up on their hopes and dreams.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously you're way closer to the world of welding than I am, but I mean, just talking about welding brands, uh, I've seen guys almost get into fist fights, based on the color of their box, and I'm like, what is
Oh,
going
that's a
on?
hill
But
a lot of welders are going to die on, man. I
yeah,
just like giving people crap. They're like, oh, I'm this brand. I'm like, okay, yeah, I like the opposite one just because that's the brand you like. Because at the end of the day, once you understand all the fundamentals, I can make money with any of those machines. Yeah, some run better than others, but I mean, I've made money off of all the different brands of welding machines. So just be a good welder at the end of the day and just kind of steer people towards what's going to work for them. Just because it works for me, great. And I love the product doesn't mean that somebody else is going to.
yeah, 100%. And that's why I think that project and some of my current projects are a little more interesting because I do try and isolate myself from the outside world. I don't want to have a forum tell me if I should be Ford or Chevy. I just want to build something that's going to move, and maybe it's got a mix of everything. Maybe there's some Kia and Hyundai parts on there. I don't really care. I just want to solve the problem in an interesting way
Just
and
make it
kind of
work.
learn something from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, do you do any of the body work and welding and stuff like that on it when you have to do some of these modifications? Because I would
So
imagine like you're working on a chassis, it's not made to do what you're trying to do with it. There's a lot of customization and modifications you got to do on it.
yeah, if you ask anyone, they will tell you that I'm a better grinder than I am a welder. Uh, but that's where I learned to weld. I taught myself, MIG and TIG just for my projects, and I think that's something that I continually encourage to family and friends and staff is if you want to learn something, try and find a project that you're going to benefit from. So you could go to a gardening class, uh, or just go out and start planting some stuff and figure it out. If you want to learn software engineering, you can go to classes, and you probably should. Uh, but you can also have a personal project that is going to like force you to learn that. So, for example, one story I love to tell is one of our software engineers. He taught himself software because he was working at a facility that processed cooked bacon, and they would sell the bacon to restaurants or whatever. And his job was to watch the bacon go by and then like hit a button if it was cooked enough or raw or burnt or whatever, and it would kick it off the conveyor. And he was like, this job is ridiculous. I wonder if I could build a robot to do this for me. And sure enough, he did. and that project was a personal need. It was something that would benefit him immediately. And so that's what taught him the skill. And I would encourage people to do that with welding, with fabrication, with just about anything. Be selfish and learn it for that reason. And then when you want to build on that skill, then start taking the classes and learn from others.
Yeah. I mean, it's always good to kind of go through and make sure that you want to commit to it, especially like you said, if you have a specific project, that's a good place to start. And then you start doing the research, and then you start going for additional training or, new training and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I tell people that and that's kind of like what I do with my school, Underground Metalworks. It's kind of like a trial period for a lot of welders. Like, do you want to turn this into a career, or do you just want to, work on your resto mod or your project you got at the house? You want to get into artwork. Okay, this is a good way to try it. They usually have a ton of research. They show up day one with a list full of questions, which is awesome. I love that. And then I can kind of guide them and point them in the right direction. But they've already done a lot of the preliminary research before they, jumped in and just decided to take a class.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it'll end up saving you time and money in the long run. Geez, I wanted to buy a sailboat once, and I was set on the sailboat. I was going to go buy it off Craigslist, and my wife is like, "For the love of God, will you just rent one, please, and just see if you like it?" And I did, And thank God I did, because that was not a good day. Uh, the boat didn't go as fast as I thought it would. I got sunburnt. I realized I don't like the water. So I saved myself a lot of money. It was a $300 rental versus a $3,000 boat. And I always remember that, anytime I'm going to do something, like, test it out first, make sure you like it, and then make the investment.
Yeah, it's like anytime I travel, like if I'm planning on purchasing a specific vehicle next, if I'm traveling, like I'll try to request that year, make, and model at the rental car place. Like, let me take it for a test drive for a week, because most of the dealerships, you hop in it, you drive around for 10, 15 minutes, back to the dealership. Oh yeah, it rode great. Yeah, it doesn't matter what vehicle it is. It's brand new. It's gonna run great. Like, take it out, test drive it for a week, but you're also kind of serving a different purpose because you're renting a vehicle to get around, but at least you kind of understand the form, function, how it works and all that good stuff.
Yeah, yeah, you can learn pretty quickly. Are you going to be able to live with, uh, how the seats work, or can you fit a bunch of people in the back, and shove the kids in there on vacation? Can you get a car seat in it? I love that. Yeah, rent stuff, test it, borrow things, go to your buddy's garage, try his stuff first before you make the investment. I've made mistakes. I wanted to do the interior of one of my cars, and I was like, oh, there's no way that can be hard. I'll figure out how to sew, and I bought a sewing machine. That's one of the only things I've really given up on. I could not sew, and I'm always amazed by, especially the interior guys that can make, these amazing creations with a sewing machine and some leather. I don't know how they do it. I tried my best, but the sewing machine went up for sale pretty quick.
Yeah, I did that when my mother passed. That's one of the things that I wanted. I was like, I want her sewing machine, and I still have it. And I was like, I'm going to train myself on how to use a sewing machine, and I just for something to do, because like even when I was in the military, like I had to sew my own stuff. So it's like it's a pretty nifty skill to have, to be able to sew something up. And man, I tried and tried and tried, and it's just not happening. Like, I watched all the videos on YouTube, did the research, because I was going to start doing like custom leather stuff, welding gear, and just for me, not like on a grand scale, and start selling it. But yeah, that kite was not going to fly. So I was like, okay, I still have it. It's sitting up in the house, but yeah, I don't think that's for me.
You have to have a need.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing, is like, you have to force yourself to go, okay, the next, welding apron that I'm going to make, I'm going to make it myself. And then you'll blow the dust off that machine and figure it out. And so you either challenge yourself, or, you have to have a need. I think, when I grew up in a very small town. It was about 300 people. And, it was a pain in the ass to go into town. And so if you wanted something, you better go back out in the barn and figure it out, put some baling wire together and some duct tape and make it work. And so I still try and do that, even when a Home Depot is, 10 minutes away. If I can kind of MacGyver something together, that's always my preference.
Yeah, I've done that, and that's why I can't throw anything away. I don't know if you have the same problem I have. You look at something, you got some extra parts. Somehow, I just got done building this thing. I followed the directions, and I've got extra parts. Well, I'm going to put that in the extra parts bin. And like, a lot of times it pays off, and then sometimes, my wife's like, "Why do you have that? It's been sitting on the floor for 2 years. Just throw it away." And it's like, "Yeah, honey, you know what? You're right. I'm going to, get rid of it." 2 days later, you're like, "Damn it, I need that."
Yeah. The cure for me is moving.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Every time I move shops, I thin out the herd a little bit, but then it just keeps going back. And if you stay in one place for too long, I definitely have some hoarder traits, and I got to fight it on a daily basis. For a while, I'd save yogurt cups. I'd eat the yogurt and then be like, well, I could put something in this, some oil or something. And I'm like, why do I have all these yogurt cups? So I'm a little bit better now. But you have to be consciously fighting it.
The coffee cans. You get like a big old thing of like Folders, the plastic ones are great. They got the lid on them and everything. And I'd put that out in the garage. I'm going to need that for something, catching oil, or, just whatever, nuts, bolts, miscellaneous parts and tools. I'll put that in there. And I had like 6 or 7 of them in there. And I'm like, okay, no, it's time. Just recycle them all.
Yeah. It's, it can be a sickness, I think.
It can. Like I know some people that are like legit hoarders, won't throw anything away. I've gotten to the point. I think when I started getting older, I'm like 41. I'm not that old, but like I just started cutting out a lot of the BS, and it's like, okay, I'm going to be honest with myself. I know I'm not going to use this. I'm just going to toss it.
Yeah. The thing that has helped me, at least like, in a professional way, like at our facilities, I learned a lot about like 5S and lean manufacturing and, just keeping things organized for the sake of efficiency. And some of that has trickled into my personal life recently. Um, but once you see the benefits of that, you're like, yeah, you'll still have coffee cans, but they'll be labeled and they'll all be a uniform size. And, so it's hoarding, but socially acceptable, I guess.
Now, did you do classes on like Lean Six Sigma, or did you have somebody come in or did you just kind of do
Just
research on it?
YouTube.
Okay.
Just YouTube. We send staff to classes, uh, but really for the innovation and just the spirit of it and the culture of it, that has to come from the top. And I've read books on it and stuff, but mostly it's YouTube and mostly just like seeing other stuff that works. And you get kind of curious as to like, how is their shop so clean, or how are they producing so many units across so many shifts with so many different levels of expertise. And then you realize, oh, they have these great standard operating procedures, or everything is labeled incredibly, or they have their stapler on a leash so it can't disappear, just little stuff like that.
Yeah.
And just continual improvement. Every time you see something, how can you make it better? And a lot of people say that they're like, oh, Jim doesn't have any nostalgia. He doesn't care about all the hard work that went into something because he'll just throw it away to make another one. And that's true. I always believe that something could be made better, and it's tough for our staff sometimes because they'll spend 40 hours working on something, and 2 weeks later we have a better idea and we go put it in the scrap bin. But the way I see it is, all right, if we do it over and it's better, then in the long run, it saves us, thousands of hours. So it's not really a waste. It's for the greater good.
Yeah, it's like that's all part of like research and development, process improvement, and that's the thing with like Six Sigma. It's a constant process improvement, and it's never going to be perfect, but you can always continuously make things better, faster, easier, more ergonomic. There's a company down here. I can't remember if I mentioned on the podcast or not, but they build 3-wheel bicycles, and they've got like a small shop. It's maybe 2,500 square feet, but they have their delivery and pickups scheduled at specific times so that they can drop off raw material first thing in the morning. And it kind of goes through like a snake-like pattern inside of this, rectangle shaped shop. And the welders walk up, they grab the materials they need for the specific parts, they cut it out, they put it, they bend it, they put it in a jig, slap everything together. So they've already got the exact size materials down to a science to where it's reducing, they can get the most amount of, usable parts out of the least amount of material. So they trim it, cope it, whatever. They slap it in this jig. They weld it all up, spin it around. They take it over to the powder coater. He powder coats it, and then they off to the assembly area, and then it gets thrown in a box and then put out on the back. And by the time they've, got 20, 30 units set up for the day, UPS is backing in to load everything up. And it's just insane. And he runs the whole business from an iPad.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that constraints deliver the best results. If you give me, 1,000,000 square feet, I'll spread out all over that place, and you're going to have to walk everywhere, and just to clean it is going to be a huge pain in the ass. Or you give me 1,000 square feet, and I'll still get something done. But with that constraint, comes a lot of innovation, a lot of efficiency. So whether your constraint is space or money or time, I think it's really good to have. We always talk about how, if I go to the grocery store with my wife and she's like, "What do you want to have for dinner?" I almost can't choose because there's so many different options. There's 100 different options on every aisle. But when we're at home and there's 3 things in the fridge, she's like, "What are you going to make for dinner?" I'm like, "All right, I'm going to take an onion."
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, here's my constraints. What can I make with that? And to me, that's the most satisfying thing. And just remembering to use that, in your professional life is good too. Sometimes, sometimes it's easy to spread out and, or hire a few too many people or whatever. And 6 months later, you're like, oh man, why did our productivity go down so much? It's because you lost some of your constraint, the stuff that made you lean and mean.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break. This segment of the Arc Junkies podcast is brought to you by Everlast Welders. Are you looking to pick up your first machine? Maybe you're ready to upgrade from your machine you bought at the local big box store, or maybe you need a machine or a few machines for your small business. Well, check out Everlast Welders. They have a machine for every skill level, budget, and process you need to handle, even true multi-process machines like the Lightning MTS series. Check out the full list of power sources at everlastwelders.com and see which machine is right for you. And as always, if you buy any machine that comes with a stock foot pedal, get that free Nova foot pedal and TIG Torch upgrade when you type in Arc Junkies in the comments section at checkout. Everlast Welders. Weld mean, weld green. Now let's get back to the show. No, I completely agree with that. Constraints are really good because it breeds creativity. So when I was teaching over at the college, we had a very small welding shop. Like very small. I had 10 students in there, or 13 students, 10 booths, 2 downdraft tables. We just had enough room for the equipment. So I wanted to teach fabrication and all these different things that I really didn't have the space for. So we put everything either on wheels or skids for a pallet jack. So I could pull everything out, put it in storage, and then, reset the lab for what we're doing for that day. So it was kind of cool because every time, week to week, the entire layout would change based off of what we're doing. Okay, we're prepping all the materials for everything we're going to, fabricate next week. Let's bring in the iron worker. We'll bring in the saw. We set everything up, get everything chopped up and, palletized and all that stuff. And okay, we get all that stuff out. Okay, now bring in the fixturing tables. Boom, and you slap everything together. So it was kind of cool because we get to do a lot more with less. Because like you said, you've got the constraints to work with. Okay, it's not impossible. We just have to figure out a better way of doing things.
Yeah, and think about if you had all the space in the world, you'd never figure that out. There's no way that you would have realized, how many steps you can save by putting everything on wheels or, scheduling the placement of certain equipment. So I don't know. I think that some of the best stuff has been invented because they didn't have any other option. Yes, sometimes like blue sky budget is really fun, but I've never seen those things work out long term.
Yeah. So now, how did you go from like designing websites and software and stuff like that into getting into cutting and bending and plating and all the stuff that you guys do over there at your shop now?
With software, it's fun. You're always solving problems, but you're solving it with your mind and your fingers on the keyboard. And it's really tough to show what you did that day. I always joked that in a future life, I'd love to be a heavy equipment operator. I'd love to, start with a big pile of dirt in the morning, and at the end of the day, all the dirt's gone. I'd be like, oh, that's what I did today. I like to be able to point to, a tangible accomplishment. So software is a little hard that way. And the other thing is like my kids have no idea what the hell I did. They're like, oh, my dad works on computers. So the software world was fun, and it was a little bit of a challenge, but it wasn't as fulfilling as like working with your hands. So, I think that's why I would, always sneak down to our shop, during lunches or after work or whatever, and go tinker on a project like Teslanda or the Steam car or whatever. So our facility, our software building, we called it the Mullet. It was business in front, party in the back. So we had about 4,000 square feet of 4,000 square feet of office and about 4,000 square feet of warehouse. And that warehouse was kind of our like secret R&D lair. We had a couple 2-post lifts in there, and myself and some of my staff, we'd go wrench on stuff. But what I found is like, even if I only had an hour at lunch to go tinker with something, like that was the best hour of my day. And I was like, man, this is great. I wish I could do something with this, even though software was paying the bills. So at one point, I was working on a project and I was sick of cutting stuff out with a handheld plasma. And I was like, I think I want one of those new fancy CNC plasmas, the plasma tables. So Lincoln, or no, this was before, I think even Lincoln
Torchmate
bought them. It was good. Yeah, Torchmate.
Yeah, because they're in Reno.
Yep. And I knew about them. I'd driven by their facility. So I was like, I'm going to go down and see those guys and see if I can get one of these plasma things. Got it. Again, to use just for kind of hobby purposes, and kind of share it amongst the guys. There was like probably 6 of us in our little group that would, share tools and stuff. I was like, let's use this plasma thing. And it was really cool. It opened up, many more projects. It opened up more complexity to the projects. Because cutting stuff with oxyacetylene or with a handheld, it was just limiting what we could do. But what I found is that plasma table would sit idle for the vast majority of its life. We'd run it for a couple hours a week and then it would go idle. I'm like, God, man, I'm making payments on this thing. And these parts are wildly expensive.
That's not a cheap system to have in your shop either.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. Really good financing though. So I was like, shit, we got to figure out a way to make this thing pay for itself. So the idea was like, how could we expand our group and have people have access to this thing so that, it could run more and at least pay for the consumables, or pay for some of the steel that was going on to it or whatever. I didn't want to keep losing money on this thing. So myself and my current CTO, and he was my last CTO at the software company, his name's Jake Graham. Like, I think we could write some software to where someone could send us their file and we would nest it, all together, like Tetris it together so that we could run 50 different customers on one sheet of material. That way we'd get really good material utilization. The machine would have great uptime. And, maybe we can turn a profit by selling these parts out to people because we could do lower quantities. At the time, a lot of fabrication shops that they wouldn't want to do one part. If you needed
50, 100, you need to
they wanted to do a bunch because of their software. Their setup fees or their setup costs were very, very high. So we're like, all right, let's figure out if we can make this this plasma table run a little more efficiently by having more customers. So we wrote some software, and it looked promising. There was a lot of manual stuff happening behind the scenes, but the overall idea was like, hey, if you're a guy in his garage who has a weird project and no one wants to make your part, we'll make it for you because we think we have this slick way of saving time and material, so we can offer it to you very quickly at a very low rate. And it was working, but then we realized that the CNC plasma was going to be our bottleneck. It was slow. It was geometry limited. It's hard to do really small holes or like intricate stuff on some of those. And then it required a lot of post-processing. So, you have to grind the slag off the back and there was a lot of dross, et cetera. So I started doing some research and I was like, well, there's a laser that we could get, but it's very, very expensive.
It's
and
about 6 times as expensive as a CNC plasma.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh God, I don't have the room, and it takes all this assist gas and stuff. Like that seems a little scary. So what if we're a software company, let's do what we do best. Let's do the software. Maybe we can shop this software to a bunch of the local shops, or small fabrication shops, and it would make them be more efficient. They could lower their quantity minimums, et cetera. And what I realized after trying that a little bit is some of these shops were legacy. They didn't really like computers. They had paper travelers, fax machines. They weren't willing to embrace this latest and greatest technology that I had developed. So, we go back to the drawing board and go, all right, I think we got to buy our own equipment, and if we want to make this work. So, I went to my wife, and I was like, hey, babe, I want to buy a $700,000 laser, and I promise you it will print money. She's like, I'll give you 6 months. If you can make the thing break even on the payment, then you can keep it. Otherwise, we're going to sell it. And so I was like, all right, here we go. So I took some savings, put the down payment, bought the laser, and continued to improve the software with my team, and struggled, for for 6 months. We didn't know what we were doing. We're a bunch of software idiots thinking that we understand manufacturing. But again, my ignorance was what enabled us to do some of the innovations that we've done. We didn't know how to track our inventory, so we built our own inventory system. We didn't know how to load material onto the laser, so we developed our own systems. We didn't know how to do quality control, so we built our own systems. And anyway, fast forward, 6 months. I don't think it was paying for itself, but we had some orders, and we were shipping stuff out the door. We called it shipping with Jim. So in the morning, we'd load up material, cut it, and then we'd have lunch. And then in the afternoon, we'd box everything up as fast as you can. We'd usually miss the FedEx truck. So then we throw it in the back of my truck. I'd drive over to FedEx and then, deliver it. So that's how we started. And then it just kind of took off from there, as more people found out about us and realized that, we could give them access to this really high dollar equipment that they couldn't have in their garage, but it was as if it was in their garage because of our turnaround times. It started taking off from there, and it's been a wild ride ever since.
Damn, what's your average turnaround time now?
Our overall record, I think, was 52 minutes.
Damn.
But right now we average anywhere from 36 to 48 hours. If it's relatively simple, if it's what we call cut and ship, sometimes even faster. We have a lot of people that are like, hey, I ordered on Monday and the parts showed up Wednesday. That's really our goal. Actually, I want to go even faster. I'm hoping that you can order today and get your parts tomorrow. And that's a logistics issue that we're trying to solve with.
Get with link up with Bezos. He'll sort you out.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's the model that we have to follow, because that's what people's expectation is now.
Yeah, with everything, not just like mail-in service or parts or anything like that, or commodities. Amazon stepped in and set a precedence to immediate gratification. I mean, there was times I was freezing my ass off at work, and I was like, man, I need bib overalls, but I'm working 7/12s. I don't have time to go shopping when I get out of work. I got to go to school after this. I literally don't have the time. I hopped on Amazon. This is back in 2010. I placed the order, and when I got home that night, and like I said, this is 2010, it was on my doorstep. I got to wear them to work the next day, which blew my mind.
I know. And then you tell all your friends, so they had all this, amazing word of mouth marketing because they blew people away with their product. And, it's, as a consumer, it's awesome. I absolutely love it. As a business owner, I'm like, God damn it, you've ruined it for everybody else. It's like sending your kid to school with lice. I'm like, what are you doing? Now we all have to deal with it, right? So for better or worse, that is the modern consumer's expectation. And I think as a fabricator, if we want to or not, that's something that we should strive for. And we do. Now, the weird thing is everything we do is custom. It's all one-off. Like, we've never seen the part before. We'll never see it again. So it's one thing to go pull a box off of a shelf and then put it in a UPS truck. It's another thing to pull raw material off a shelf, fabricate it, put it in a box, and then put it on a UPS truck. So, I think we talked about constraints, and we talked about, projects that are never ending and continual improvement. This is all of them wrapped in one.
Yes. So people can just send you a file that's ready to cut, or do you have to go in there? Well, because I would imagine you can't really trust that the customer, as much as you want to, you can't trust that that's a good file and it's going to cut correctly. So did they just send you like a DWG and you just go through and make sure all the lines are connected and everything's correct? Because they're not sending you G code, right? Because you run it on a completely different software, I would imagine.
Oh yeah. We write our own G code. in the cloud on demand. That would be terrifying, accepting someone's G code.
Yeah.
Uh,
You don't want to take mine. I'm still very rudimentary at best.
yeah, we'd have a few more crashes than we do today. Yeah, people can upload, a step file or a DXF or a DWG or whatever. And, again, having software background, that's where we shine. That we can do a lot of design for manufacturability checks, right there in the browser and figure out, is this going to work or not? Are the holes too small or too close to the edge? Is this bend going to collide with our tooling? Is this material really thick and we're going to introduce a bunch of heat into an area and it's going to melt out? So we look at all those parameters and run our algorithms on it, and we can kind of do a go, no go, even before we give you the price. And then, if once the customer checks out, they're like, and it passed some of our initial checks, then we do run, some humans will check some of the parts, like as a spot check too, just to validate our algorithms and make them better. So yeah, by the time it gets to the machine, it's been pretty well vetted. And yeah, we try and manufacture it, as accurately as to your design as possible. Occasionally we'll see stuff that's not manufacturable, and we will offer, manufacturability feedback to, and be like, hey man, if you can move this over, 5 millimeters, we can make it work. And, I think that's why our customers really appreciate us, because all of our customer support, they're actually people who are fabricating too.
It's not outsourced to Dubai or something like that.
No. No, they're all here in the U.S. and they all have hobbies. In order to qualify for our support, you have to be, into robotics or design or fabrication or welding or whatever. I think with our team, put together with all the skill sets that we have, like we could make just about anything from scratch.
That's pretty sick. Now, do you still mess around with plasma at all, or is it strictly just laser and water jet now because it's a lot more efficient, a lot more post-process cleanup and all that?
Yeah. No more plasma. We sold that machine. And once you go to laser from plasma, it's really hard to go back. The accuracy and the lack of cleanup and the weld ready edge is a huge thing for us. So we love laser when it makes sense. However, it doesn't make sense all the time. So there's a lot of materials that we can't cut with the laser. All of our composites, like carbon fiber and G10, wood, etc. Either just the laser has no effect on it, or it immediately turns it into smoke or goo. So that's when we'll decide to use either a CNC router or one of our water jets.
Okay, so like when you're messing around with like UHMW or HEDP and all that stuff.
Yep.
Carbon fiber.
Yeah, like the heavy plastics. Typically, we'll throw on a CNC router because it gives us a really nice machined edge, and we can't do ultra fine geometry. The smallest hole that we can make is about an 1/8 inch, just because of tooling limitations. Whereas on the laser, we can make a hole that's, I don't know, 10 thou. Our beam is only 6 thou in diameter, so we can make some really accurate holes. But yeah, the router's a great product for plastic, because lasers just turn that to goo. And then like carbon fiber, you can cut it on a router, but it's really dangerous. A lot of the dust that it makes is really, really bad to breathe in, and it's really bad for electronics. So because it's so highly conductive, if it works its way into any motor or wiring or whatever, it'll short it out immediately. So that's where the water jet is amazing. We cut carbon fiber on water jet using, garnet is our abrasive media. And we had to develop a lot of special piercing technology so that we could pierce the carbon fiber without delaminating it. That was a huge challenge for us in the beginning, but I really wanted to offer carbon fiber because it's such a cool material to be able to work with, especially for some of our aerospace customers or people making drones or RC cars or whatever. it's incredible how strong it is, but it's really hard to manufacture. So water jet is really special there. However, water jet is painfully slow, especially compared to lasers. Some of our lasers are rapiding at 4,000 inches a minute, 5,000 inches a minute.
Jeez.
And then, the water jet on a heavy cut is moving at like 2 inches a minute. So it's hard to watch, but it is what's best for that material.
Okay, so you guys just basically pick the cutting process based off the material that's coming in?
Correct. Yeah, we don't actually allow our customers to choose the process. So oftentimes we'll have customers that are like, hey, I want this 6061 aluminum, but I want it cut on your water jet, instead of your laser, because I'm worried about Has. And, we have to say, no, I'm sorry, because it's either going to take 2 minutes of machine time versus 2 hours. And really with the laser, especially with the assist gases that we use, like there's almost no Has.
Well, because the rate of travel speed too. I mean,
you're
you're
actually
in and gone before it's even had a chance to get hot.
Totally. That's the thing, especially as these modern lasers are starting to get more and more powerful every year. We started out with 3 kilowatts. Now our most powerful is 12 kilowatts. But there's machines out there that are 30 kilowatts. And, it just starts to get wild as to how fast these things are moving. Most of the parts that, as soon as it's done cutting, you can reach into the machine, grab the part with your bare hands, and it's barely warm.
Now, what do you do? Because I would imagine, do you still have like post-process cleanup and stuff like that? Because, I mean, you guys also do coating and everything. So if you have like mild steel or something like that that's got mill scale on it, you still have to remove all that before you can like powder coat it or anything like that. Are you doing like sandblasting, tumbler, time saving, anything like that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We have a huge part of the building dedicated, or each of our buildings dedicated to post-processing. So we do, deburring using time savers. You send it through, it's a 37-inch belt or whatever, in order to remove, heavy dross, or, you give it a grained finish, whatever. We also do ceramic tumbling. We use a centrifugal machine so that it cuts the cycle time down significantly. We used to have the big like bowl tumblers, they're like 4 feet across and everything spins around. That could take hours. With the centrifugal machines, it takes like 10 minutes.
Damn.
So yeah, you can tumble stuff really quick. And yeah, we have sandblasting and, various like acid baths and stuff, depending on what the material is, to prep it for powder or plating or anodizing.
Yeah, because that's always the worst part of it. It's like, man, I cut it out and it's awesome. Now I got to go through and clean it, take the dross off the mill scale and all that stuff. I had a group of 15 students in my shop last week. They came in just to kind of learn about what welding is. And so I turned them loose on a bunch of fillet welds and stuff like that. So we started the group off doing just fundamentals of welding, safety and all that. And then at the end of the day, I let them weld a bunch of airplanes. So I'd cut them out on the CNC plasma cutter. And I was like, by the time this is over, I'll probably have close to 40 or 50 students, because they're coming in on consecutive Fridays based off their schedule and mine. But I was like, man, I've got to clean up each airplane's 3 parts. I've got 40 sets of planes that I cut out. I've got, 120 parts to clean up. And I was like, I don't have the time to sit there with a chip and hammer to knock the dross off and then hit it with a wire wheel or grind it. So I went and bought a concrete mixer from Harbor Freight for like $200 and a $5 bag of pea gravel from Home Depot. And I dumped all that in there with, 10 sets at a time. And within about 20 minutes, it's got all the dross knocked off. A good bit of the mill scale is gone. It's weldable at that point to where it's not an issue. Yank them out, and I just put them in a bucket of water, scrub them off with a little brush, hit them with an air hose, boom, it's done. So it's a massive time saver. But, that's kind of like, I'm balling on a budget over here, but a time saver would be like the next best investment if I was going to keep cutting out a bunch of, 2D parts. Oh, yeah. Yeah. They're amazing pieces of machinery. They literally save time. They take up a lot of our time for maintenance, though. I'll tell you that. Like those machines are in a difficult environment. So yeah, they need a lot of maintenance. Those things are
one of them is always half a part, so everything we do is redundant. We always make sure that we have at least 2 or 3 of the same machine. Um, again, my ignorance in starting this company, I was like, oh, we'll do quick turn. If I would have known what I know now, I probably would have not done that. Quick turn is incredibly hard. You have no time for anything to be down. You have no time for any suppliers to be late. You have no time to miss a truck. So a lot of our investment is actually in redundancy and making sure that we have uptime. So yeah, time savers, we have a bunch of them. There's always a couple working. There's always a couple down.
That was going to be one of my questions was like, what are some of the growing pains that you all went through? Because you pretty much grew your company at a rapid pace.
Yeah, every dime that we've made has just gone right back into it. So, it's all for the customer. It's like if I can take any profit and put it back into better equipment and get them faster parts, or if I can invest that in inventory and lower my prices, that's what's allowed us to grow the company. It's just not being greedy. Trying to buy better equipment, more efficiency, more selection, et cetera. So yeah, it's been, we'll be 6 years, November 1st. That's our anniversary. So we're coming up on that later this year. And yeah, we started with one laser. Now we have total lasers in the facilities, 6, 8, like 9 or 11, something like that.
Dang.
All busy, and multiple CNC routers, and it's wild when you get to that scale, because then you start to realize like we have full-time maintenance staffs. At the beginning it was just like, well, at lunch we'll go clean a machine or whatever. I'll come in on the weekend. So that was like my son. He's 14 now, but when we started, what was he, 8, I guess. Every Saturday, we'd go in and clean machines and sweep the floors and stuff. And that was our Saturday, Sunday. Now, we're lucky to find an hour somewhere where we can shut down. So yeah, scaling has been a huge challenge, but luckily, even though we've done a lot in 5 or 6 years, it's been barely maintainable. We haven't gone so big, so fast where it got out of hand. It was just like, as soon as something was done, we were on to the next thing. So, we spun up a facility in Paris, Kentucky, a couple of years ago. And that was a huge challenge. As soon as those guys were up and running, we outgrew our Reno facility. So we had to move. And so we went from spinning up a new facility to moving a facility. And then as soon as we got settled here, now we're opening up a third facility. So it's like, if I tried to do all 3 of those things at the same time, I'd explode. But because we can do them in a very, very rapid series, it's been barely manageable. But there's a lot more gray in my beard than there used to be.
But I mean, at least now you have experience opening another facility. So I'm sure the third location that you guys open up, it's going to be a lot more easier because you've already got like a standard operating procedure. Here's what worked last time. And I would imagine you guys are going through tracking all the analytics, what worked, what didn't work, what can we improve on? I mean, that kind of seems like it's been your business model the whole time, is like constant improvement.
100%. Yeah.
And then tracking traceability and all the analytics that goes along with it.
Yeah, we learn. We document. We always joke that we need a company historian. I wish that we had someone just writing down a timeline of what we did and why we did it. Because sometimes we'll do something like 2 or 3 times. We'll be like, oh, wait, didn't we try that last summer and then it didn't work? Oh, yeah, okay. Now I remember why. We keep a lot of it in, data and analytics, and we can see trends. But again, we're kind of moving into uncharted territory because of like our speed and our reinvestment and everything. There's not a lot of people doing it. We can look at some other industries outside of fabrication and get some ideas. It's like I'm reading books on, how did Walmart, grow to so many stores? What was their team look like? As far as real estate, and how can you hire people faster? How can you hire good people faster? There's all these challenges that come with it, and that's when you start to see your team grow in ways that you didn't imagine. Like, our technical project managers, we didn't have that luxury when we first started. We didn't have anyone planning. We would just wing it. And now we have people who can dedicate their entire job just to planning and making sure stuff is going to land on time, on budget, et cetera. So they pay for themselves 100 times over, which is stuff we didn't know we needed until we needed it.
Now, how do you go about tracking, like you said earlier, you got 50 different customers, you're putting all their parts on one sheet. Once that, the laser gets out of the way or the water jet gets out of the way, how do you go in there and pick everything to the right job order, make sure it gets put in the right envelope and sent back to the correct client?
Some of that is proprietary. Some of it's kind of secret sauce, and I can't talk too much about it. But we use a lot of characteristics in order to identify those parts and make sure that they are going to the right person at the right time. We have a dedicated quality department, but we quickly realized that wasn't good enough. Every single person on the floor has to be quality. So, in addition to our software that's looking at stuff and our tracking systems and, the way we look at some of these qualities, using machines and synthetic vision or, whatever you want to call it. In addition to that, we also have humans that are looking, going, does this seem right? That doesn't look right. Or, oh man, I just saw that part a little bit ago. I wonder if that one dropped and got into the wrong tote or whatever. So everyone is checking everyone else's work. So, like you said, with deburring, before you're going to deburr something, make sure the part is correct. Is it the right thickness? Does it match all the customer specs? Before you go to bend it, make sure that it's the right material, or is the count there? Why are you going to start bending a bunch of stuff when we don't have the correct count for some reason? Something got lost. So everyone checks each other, and it allows us to move stuff really, really quickly with very little error. But when there are errors, we know how to handle it. Everyone knows what to do and who to go to.
I got you. Now, do you have like a minimum quantity or a maximum quantity? Like you have to get 10 at a time, or can you just like, hey man, I need one part, Jim. Can you help me out? Like, can you do that?
Yeah, our minimum quantity is one, and our minimum order value that will ship out the door is $29. So, and that's with free shipping. So if you just need one little rectangle, it'll be $29. That's our minimum charge. But no minimum quantity, no maximum quantity either. We've done multiple tons of material for single customers. We've loaded up semi-trailers full of parts for single customers. That's the great thing about our process is we designed it to handle a quantity of one. So actually handling a quantity of 100,000 it's actually kind of easier for us in some ways. I think going the opposite way, where if you're set up to do massive quantities and then you try and do a single quantity, you're like, oh man, this is impossible. So we were lucky to kind of stumble into doing it the hard way first. And then everything else kind of seems easy to us.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you order T-shirts or like anything in bulk, it's a lot cheaper the second, or like the more you get, because the initial setup fee is what that takes up the bulk of the work. After that, it's just plug and play. You just rinse and repeat until you hit that quantity number and you ship it out the door.
Yep. Yeah, and so we tried to make our minimum price low enough so that it's still attractive to the hobbyist or whatever they just need one little thing. They're making a tool for a project that they're going to use once. I wanted to make it low enough to where we could still support them, but at the same time, I wasn't losing a massive amount of money on each one. We do lose money on some orders, not intentionally, but it's just how the bell curve works. And we target that middle of the bell curve where we can have just enough profit to reinvest into the company, but maintain our prices and be as competitive as possible, especially like in those higher quantities, like you said, um, because our software does a lot of the work for us. Like we don't have, staff of engineers reading blueprints or anything. It's all done with our software. Our setup fees are actually minimal. When we charge that $29, it's so that we can, you know, retrieve the material, we can inspect it, we can put it in a FedEx envelope and send it to you. One of the bigger costs for us is shipping and logistics. I didn't realize when I started this company that I was going to be starting a shipping company. Um, it's like I'm not in manufacturing, I'm in logistics, and I know even less about logistics than I do about manufacturing.
That's got to be a pretty steep learning curve.
It's hard, it's weird, it's complex. Luckily, we have great partners. FedEx and UPS have been amazing for us. What I've realized is when you go to these people and you raise your hand and you're like, "Hey, man, I have no idea what I'm doing. Please help us." They'll take you under their wing and figure it out. If you go in there with any ego or try and grind them down on a price or something like that, they'll put up a wall. But when you can kind of open up yourself and say, "Help me, I want to be a partner," they'll be reciprocal, and that's really how we've built our business. It's on our partners with logistics and transit, and with our suppliers and vendors, our raw material people. All the way down to like catering. We cater lunch for 2 shifts every day, and just telling those people like, we don't know what the hell we're doing. Is there a way that we can, waste less food or get it here earlier, or how do we have a bigger variety of menu? And they're the experts. They'll figure it out, and we've learned a lot from that. And sometimes, if they really like us, they'll even come to work here. So we fired a number of our FedEx drivers, some of our suppliers. It's really cool.
It's like anytime you call a catering company, you're like, "Hey, I got to feed 40 people, but I don't want them to go away hungry, but I also don't want a bunch of food left over." Because anytime I order pizzas, there's, because we do the AWS section events, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, like 15 pizzas, we got this many people coming in, that should work." And then, like, at the end of the night, you're giving away boxes of freaking pizza and, 2 liters of pop and soda and whatnot. And it's like, wow, we could have saved about $60 if we would have ordered right, but I'm not in the business of catering. Like, I know welding and fabrication. There's other people out there that know that stuff.
Yeah. And just, I think having no ego and just being like, I don't know what I'm doing. Help me. These catering guys, they do it all day, every day. The logistics guys do it all day, every day. They've seen more challenges in their industry than I could ever hope for. And I just trust them to do their work. The easiest thing about my job is I just have to surround myself with people smarter than me and let them do their work.
Yeah.
And, that's the quickest way to success.
Now, do you run 24/7?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, we run 24/7, and we're shut down a couple of the big holidays, but now we're actually seeing those less as holidays and more as opportunities to do preventative maintenance. So, of course, volunteer, and if someone wants to spend their 4th of July repainting part of the floor, they get paid very well. But it's like we have fewer and fewer of those opportunities, as we're kind of running at full tilt.
Have you ever heard of the a night train system?
No, I haven't.
So there's a company down here called Earnest Products, and they've got this system called the night train because they have a laser, and they constantly feed this thing. And I think they do all their in-house parts, the bulk of the time, but they also outsource other folks' parts. So they've got their lasers running like 24/7. So what the night train system does is it organizes everything by trays, and I guess these trays are like 4 foot by 8 foot. So it'll go pluck a sheet and it cuts some material out of it, and it knows how many, square inches are remaining on that piece of material. So if it has to make another cut with that same material, it's like, oh yeah, B17 has 500 square inches. We need 490. Boom! It'll run over there, and the whole machine's automated. It'll pull that sheet back out, throw it on the laser. It cuts the part out, and then, it puts whatever's left back in, right back in that bin. But it runs 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
all
Same
like
here.
fully automated.
Yeah. We run something similar, I guess. At first when we started, I'm like, oh God, how are we going to keep these things running all the time? And, do we do lower margin stuff at night, or can we sell to other fabricators locally, like, who don't have capacity? Can we sell them some of our capacity, et cetera? And, every once in a while, as we add capacity, we'll try and run that equation. Our demand curves up very smoothly. However, our capacity goes up in stair steps. So there's always a point where we're under or over capacity. And for us to spin up, new equipment, it can take, months sometimes. So we're like, okay, we have too much capacity right now, but we know we're not going to have enough. So sometimes we're buying more equipment when we don't need it because we know that we're going to need it. So it's this crazy balance that goes back and forth. But luckily, we're seeing some of that smooth out. Like with volume comes some smoothing of that, and then being able to offer, different lead times for different materials. That's been really helpful. Our popular stuff like, 50-52 aluminum and mild steel, stainless steel. We turn that stuff, multiple times per day, multiple sheets. And some of our less popular stuff like 1/4 inch brass, um, some of the weird plastics or stuff, maybe we're only going to run that, once every couple days or something like that. So it's allowed us to kind of balance out some of the capacity issues, either under or over. Um, and then, like you said earlier, some of our predictive modeling is allowing us to say, like, okay, it feels like things are great right now, but we know in 3.2 months, we're going to need another, 12 kilowatts of capacity. So how do we bring that on? Where can we shove it? When do we need to go to another location to meet our logistics obligations and cut down our transit time? It's a never-ending puzzle. But that's, I think, why I keep showing up.
Just to see what's next.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's next for the company?
More speed. Again, talking about the Amazon thing where you can order bib overalls and they just show up the next day. When I do, my own projects, I have a short amount of time. I'm usually working. So if I'm doing something personal, it means that I'm on a time budget. So the faster I can get my parts or the supplies to do this project, the better. And I think that rings true with, a lot of our customers is sure, maybe they can get a lower price if they wait 2 weeks, or 6 weeks. But sometimes you just need it. And so how can I get it so that you can order today and it shows up to your house tomorrow? We can do that with air freight, and overnight, but it's so expensive. It just, even if you pay it and you get your parts and you're happy that you got your parts, you're still left feeling, a little dirty. You're like, someone took advantage of me because uh, that was way too expensive. So the way for us to solve that is, being as close to our customers as possible for the manufacturing. So additional facilities, and kind of having this like cookie cutter process to open up new facilities, so that we can hit those crazy targets that we've set for ourselves.
Okay. Man, that's pretty impressive, man. Everything you've been able to accomplish in 6 short years. I mean, you've already set up 2 facilities. You're getting ready to set up a third, and then starting off as a software guy. Just building websites, reading books at Barnes and Nobles, trying to figure out how to build a websites, to running, several manufacturing facilities across the U.S. and getting ready, like I said, getting ready to plan a third one. It's very impressive.
Thanks. It's something I think, I'm proud of. I know my team is really proud of. I don't really know what the next 5 years will look like. But I definitely know that we always see opportunity for improvement. We're always, trying weird new things. Again, I think our lack of experience in some areas allows us to think differently. They always say that kids are so creative, and it's because kids don't know any different. They've never had their ass handed to them. with all these failures so they can blue sky everything they want. So having that mentality when it comes to, manufacturing or logistics or whatever, I think it's a blessing and a curse. Because now that we have learned some stuff and we tell it to someone who's been in the industry for 20 years, we're like, oh, we just discovered X. And they're like, oh my God, you idiots. Like you would have learned that, day one, if you ever worked anywhere else, in manufacturing. So we have some embarrassing moments, but then we're also able to kind of like push the industry forward at the same time.
No, that's really cool. Like, especially without having that experience to do as well as you guys are doing, and the quality of the parts that you're putting out, and for somebody that doesn't have a manufacturing background, you guys are out there kicking ass.
Yeah, thanks, man. We're trying.
Well, where can people find out more information about your company? Go ahead and plug your socials, any emails or LinkedIn's or any of that stuff.
Oh yeah, thanks. SendCutSend.com. That's us. We're on Instagram at SendCutSend. Same thing on YouTube. Search us on YouTube. We try and do some educational videos. On Instagram, we post a ton of our customer projects. That's our number one thing, is to show people like what other people are making. So if you ever need inspiration or you need to figure out like what's a clever way of solving this problem, our Instagram probably has it.
Okay. Well, fantastic. Jim, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you on the podcast. I appreciate you coming out here and kind of sharing your story with the listeners, and hopefully it inspires some other entrepreneurs out there.
Yeah, right on. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you. All right, ladies and gents, I hope you all enjoyed the show. If you're finding these episodes beneficial to your welding journey, please leave me a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and consider sharing the episodes with a friend. You can also stream episodes directly from my website, arcjunkies.com, and feel free to hit me up with any questions, comments, or concerns by sending an email to show@arcjunkies.com. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Stay safe out there, and until next time, make every weld better than your last.